we should just roll into the discussion now.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been thinking about doing this for a while, which is just, talking to people. That's the one thing, we're doing a lot with the Bernstein videos over the last decade and the social media, links and information. But the one area that has been kind of not looked at or whatever is talking to people who have undergone this transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So just to introduce I guess this is like our initial podcast if we decide to keep doing this. But
yeah,
you're Mike Fitzpatrick.
Yep. I'll make a quick introduction. My name's Mike Fitzpatrick, and I'm 39 years old. I live on the East Coast of the United States in Maryland. I've had type 1 diabetes for 25 years. I just hit my 25-year diaversary. And I've been relatively pretty well controlled with my A1C since I was diagnosed at age 14. But it hasn't been until the last few years that I've really tried to kick it in gear with the Bernstein method. Typically growing up, my A1C was in the low 6s to high 5s, and recently the last year or so I've been between 5.0 to 5.3, and I'm really doing all that I can these days to try to get it under 5.0.
Yeah.
And
are you close?
I'm close, and taking the course that you put together, that's one of the things that I wanted to look at with basal and bolus regimens, to see if I can try to knock it down better. Right now, I'm using a tandem T-Slim with Control IQ pump, and I took a page out of the Bernstein book, and I'm now using regular insulin to cover my meals with bolus, and so far it's been absolutely fantastic.
Interesting.
Before I had to, I kept doing these extended boluses back to back to back, and now I really can keep my foot off the gas pedal. So it's been good.
So there's so much. I just want to dive in on all those topics. So the first thing I wanted to ask about is, it's interesting that you're not happy with, let's say you were 5.9 or 6.1. Now, most people who are doing that well and not eating low carb say things like, my blood sugars are perfect, and the doctor says that they're perfect, and you can get perfect blood sugars without going low carb. But then when you look at their blood sugars, they're 5.8, 6.1. And as Bernstein would say, that's a blood sugar average of 130, which is approaching double normal.
Right.
And so let's hear your point of view about why you wanted to switch and what it was like to run at 6%.
Sure. So a couple of things. When I was running at 6%, that might be good and all for ADA and my endo and my medical team. They were happy about that. But 6%, I was waking up with blood sugars 250 every single morning. I was having regular seizure lows at least once a month. My wife would have to call fire rescue. They'd have to revive me all the time. I also did a lot of digging after I found the Bernstein book and online medical publications, and I found the dangers of running elevated blood sugars, even in the pre-diabetic level, 5.6,
Right.
5.7. It leads to cardiovascular disease, retinopathy, neuropathy, all that kind of stuff. And I took a look at myself, and I was like, you know what, I can do better. I'm not going to settle for this. I refuse to be controlled by diabetes. I'm going to take control of my diabetes and get healthy. And that's where I'm at today.
But how are you still, your endo probably love that 6%, maybe, but there's people out there getting 8, 9%. So what were you doing just to get down to the 6%? Because even that is rare.
Sure. So I was taking massive industrial doses of insulin.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, RD, you probably wouldn't recognize me, but I was about 160 pounds heavier, and I was constantly feeding the insulin, and just kept taking insulin to make sure that my blood sugars were as low as possible. And I was able to somewhat get a lower A1C than the norm, but when I did that, I was getting the fluctuations, and I was eating a lot more calories. I wasn't using glucose. I was using food to treat, and I was, eating throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found low carb, it kind of it really lowered my insulin requirements, or my hunger levels and my insulin requirements. It's all tied together, and I was
Yeah.
able to get the weight off. I was able to get flatline blood sugars. The best thing for me was waking up with absolutely normal blood sugars. Like today, I woke up and my blood sugar was 93, and I can't be happier. In the last week, my blood sugar's been 93, whereas a year ago or a year and a half ago, I was waking up with blood sugars over 200 every single day. And you can't live with that, and you feel absolutely horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't compare how I feel today with how I felt just a couple of years ago, even though I had an A1C of like 6.2, 6.3, something like that. So it's when you find something that works, you really, or at least I really do a deep dive into it, and I try to learn as much as I can about health, nutrition, getting better control of your diabetes, and it just becomes a positive reinforcement cycle, I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find something that works, you want to tell the world, and that's
Yeah.
why I'd love to talk to you today about it. So
Let's talk about the world. You have such an I've heard your story in different forms
Mhm.
from so many people, yet when I see it shared, there's this I would say there's a level of rage, which is a sort of astonishing to me. It was not a surprise that bacon and eggs works better than oatmeal, and that there were then some deeper level strategies that Bernstein uses to cover the bacon and eggs, and he exposes the physiology so that you can use insulin in the low carb context. All those things were kind of mechanical, and how to correct and all that stuff. But what's still the surprise to all of us and our family and everyone I know, that 10 years later, there's such a rage when you explain to people, it maybe like there's a low carb cinnamon muffin that you could use that's pretty delicious, and you have that with some eggs instead of
it's
this
exactly the same. Yep.
what's your take on that rage? What's the source of that?
It's that's a really good question. From taking your class, or one thing that I really appreciated was your wife, Roxanne. She talks about where people are in the grieving process after being diagnosed. And I think being outraged is a part of that. And I think the lack of information, the lack of or the amount of myths that's portrayed in the diabetic world, and type 1 diabetes in particular, it's mind-boggling. It's kind of like Neo waking up in the Matrix
Yeah.
after you see all the falsehoods, all the mythology that surrounds type 1 diabetes,
Yeah.
regarding nutrition, insulin dosing,
Science fiction is required to
yeah,
explain it.
it's just like Plato's allegory in the cave. I feel like those of us who are type 1 with low carb, aiming for the normal blood sugar A1Cs, we're the ones that have been kind of enlightened.
Yeah.
That might be kind of outrageous for me to say, but that's really how I feel.
And there's Hollywood villains in this story too. There's these
Yeah.
sponsored idiots that go around, what's the Pied Piper story where they convince, and organizations that convincing people to perform these strategies that don't work, and
Yep.
shoot for these levels, which are scientifically, shown to cause huge
Guarantee to give
issues.
you complications. Yep. And when you do a real deep dive into the nutrition, which I know that you've done extensively, RD, and I'm just getting into myself, you just see all the interconnectedness between, the food companies and the high
Mhm.
carb, sugar foods, the addiction
Mhm.
to food. I think addiction has a large part to play with it. Uh,
Huge.
Something that Roxanne said that is really that kind of stuck with me is that especially for type 1 is food is nutrition. It's not it's not like a reward. So when you kind of when you view food through that lens, that food is a way to get healthier. Food can be delicious, but it's not something that should carry all these
Yeah.
reward connotations.
Yeah.
It kind of sets you free, I think.
It is
Uh,
freeing, especially as a
Especially,
type 1.
yeah, especially as a type 1.
Yeah.
I see a lot of cognitive dissonance with a lot of people who poo-poo low carb without having tried it, um, saying that, oh, you can't tell us how to eat. I deserve, having muffins and uh, pancakes and grapes and stuff like that. But there's low
Grapes.
carb. Yeah, exactly. There's low carb alternatives to everything, and you would enjoy your meals and your life so much better as a type 1 and even type 2, just cutting out all the crap. And uh,
Oh yeah.
the crap that we're talking about is not, there's still room for vegetables and all that stuff. We're just talking about the stuff from the middle aisles, the refined crap, the flour, the sugar,
Yeah.
and that stuff. And it has such a hold on Western society and the whole world. It's really mind-boggling. And when you recognize it, that it kind of awakens you to the problem, the true problem that's going on. So,
It's the it it's the addictive food that I think is at the root of this issue that we brought up about why it's happening. So I saw, many years ago, I saw a comment by a parent, uh, and she said that we didn't change anything about our diet when our son was diagnosed. And I thought, damn, we changed everything about how we eat as a family when my son was diagnosed. And I don't know how you can be proud of that, because if you're eating the standard American diet and you're feeding that to your type 1 kid, which was what was happening, you're watching these blood sugars, and if you have a small kid, you're managing that blood sugar for them. So you're seeing quantitative evidence of your approach every single day, and you're still choosing that approach. You're
especially with
fine.
CG.
Yeah, you're finding that valid. And then when you're given an example of, and there's examples everywhere now, because some people are not rejecting the low carb, they're embracing it. And then, like you just said a minute ago, you're eager to help others. And that's how it works, because you escape from this prison.
Right.
And when you show these flat lines, or again, it's the you would think that the natural reaction would be, oh my God, you can just,
Yes.
you can have
Yep.
almond flour waffles and it solves this problem. It's like, yeah, but it's
But
not the
yeah,
case.
it's absolutely surprising when you get the opposite reaction.
It is.
You get anger. It's it's shocking because it's something that's worked so well for me and so well for thousands of other people.
Yeah.
And when someone else has an experience that's counter to mine, and I know that they really haven't explored it, it's kind of disappointing. I think a big part of type 1 also You really can't blame a lot of the parents and the people who were newly diagnosed with type 1, because that's the advice that they're given
Yeah,
when they're diagnosed. It's the ADA
that's
diet.
right.
You've got to eat 45 to 60 grams of carbs. That's what, almost like 250, 300 grams of carbs a day, and that's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
going to guarantee out of control
guarantee.
blood sugars.
It's
And
it's a mathematical guarantee.
yes,
And the only
and
way to fight it is what you were doing, which is a lot of that's what a lot of people do now is they play this up down game. They pretend that they can solve this problem, and they pretend that a solution is like a 5.8 or a 6.0, which is what you said. It's approaching double normal. You're still going to have the big problems. I know people who are in my age group that are type 2, and they've been eating poorly for decades, and now the type 2 has finally arrived and their blood sugars are at 5.8. So people don't appreciate that you have to really, if you don't have type 1, you have to abuse yourself metabolically for a couple decades to get your blood sugar to that level. So healthy people are not walking around with those kinds of blood sugars. They're walking around with A1Cs under 5.0%.
right.
So
And it's kind of and it's also kind of makes me angry thinking how I was getting a pat on the back, in the high fives and the low sixes, saying that I'd be okay. But after all the studying I did, it just, I learned that no, you need to do better.
yeah,
And that, combined with the bad advice that you get when you're diagnosed. Most doctors don't get any kind of nutrition training. The dietitians that you talk
right.
to don't know what the heck they're talking about.
Straight
Um,
food pyramid, man.
exactly. You
Yeah,
have to. I think it takes it takes a special person to kind of pick your head up and kind of not accept what is being told to you, but to kind of take the onus on yourself to really take your health in your own hands,
yeah.
because no one's going to do that for you. The doctors aren't going to do that for you. There's, they have
No,
patients. They just write you a prescription, review your labs, and send you out the
yeah.
door.
That's what Bernstein said. He said without the book, there was nowhere else to go. That's
Yeah.
why he had to write the book. Because
Yep.
people think he's. I've had comments that people think he's making a lot of money off the book, and I don't think people understand the economics of book publishing if they think
Right.
that you can write a book like that and make
Yeah.
money from it.
And the Bernstein story. I mean, he's absolutely amazing what he's done.
Yeah,
He could have been one of the all-time great theoretical physicists or whatever he's today.
correct.
I understand he was one of the youngest people to be accepted to Columbia, and then he was the oldest person to be accepted to medical school.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah.
and he was getting the same kind of crap that the people in the low carb community are getting today. He was booed and shouted
Hmm.
down at professional conferences. They refused
Yes.
to publish him, even though experience and evidence were on his side. So it's just
And now we
even
have this new wrinkle to the story that people like you and like Dave and all these, there's so many people now, they posting these graphs, and then there's some papers starting to appear and so on, and social media sort of makes everything egalitarian, and you have this it's sort of incontrovertible now, and then there's these odd pushbacks about like eat what you want in bolus and play this up. There's like this strategy to play this up down game where you're either drinking juice boxes or taking big chunks of. But we know too, again, if you go to the literature, we know that the obesity epidemic is massive in type 1 right now. So these strategies, which is
I lived it. I lived it.
you
I
lived it. It's
I
unbelievable.
was taking over 200 units of insulin per day.
Mhm.
I was slamming 50 unit bolus injections, and today I'm taking like 35 units total per day. And it's just
When
such
did you start losing weight?
probably around November 2020, and it's about November 2022 right now, this being taped. So I just woke up and I said, this, enough is enough.
Yeah.
I'm 38 years old. By the time I'm 40, I want to be healthy for my kids. I want to be there
Yeah.
for my great grandkids. And the way I'm going, I'm going to die of a heart attack when I'm
I
50
have
years old.
I have a variant of that 10,000 hour practice rule. My rule is the 5 year expertise rule. So like I started playing golf, many years ago. It took me 5 years to be, get it, start shooting in the 70s. And recently I started playing chess because I don't know why. I just started getting
Yeah.
interested in it, and I suck. But I've been playing for a year and I got better, and weight loss too is something that I was very overweight, and it took me 5 years to get into shape where I lost that weight, and it's like I
Mhm.
still I still have to pay attention to it, even though I eat low carb and stuff, doesn't matter. You can still, eat nuts or cheese or, just three
Some
meals
people,
a
some
day.
people only
Three
stick
meals
to
a day, I
butter,
can gain weight.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something I really have to pay attention to as well. And someone I recently found was Ted Naiman, and
Yeah.
I'm really his lean protein,
Yeah.
reduce the carbs, which I obviously do, and reduce the fat, and it'll improve the satiety per calorie. So that's something that I've
Yeah.
been
That's a
with.
big name. If you know two doctors, they should be, well, let's say three. Let's say Bernstein, Naiman, and Westman. Those are my favorite three doctors. I think,
Yes.
if I was going to share a book with my mom, who's always kind of interested in these issues, there's a
Mhm.
it's called End Your Carb Confusion with Westman and Berger. That's a really good book.
Mhm.
Uh,
Amy Berger, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. She's awesome too. So okay, so let me ask you a technical question. So a while back when you started, you had all these great things to dive off on, but one thing you talked about was using regular. And then you talked about how, the information this is like the biggest example of misinformation that you're given at diagnosis about carb counting, the effects of protein. Why would you want to use this old insulin? So
Yeah,
what's your
yeah.
historical take on that too?
Sure. So when I was first diagnosed back in 1997, I was put on MPH and regular. And then shortly after that, I was put on, I think it was Humalog or something like that. So the
Mhm.
last time I took regular was probably like 1999, 2000, something like that. I don't remember. Um, but fast forward to recently, I found that eating a low carb diet, it's mostly protein and fat, and I would have these slow, gradual rises that would take a very long time to come back down. And the Novolog that's being pumped out by my pump, it's these really short kind of waves. So I'd have to do these extended um, boluses,
Yeah.
which you can do 2 hours at a time, and I'd have to do like back to back to back 2 hour boluses. And I was seeing online that a lot of low carb type 1 diabetics were having a lot of success using regular insulin. So that's just something else that I thought was an innovation, even though it's an old idea
Yeah.
to use. And I asked my endo about it, and she poo-pooed it. I went
Yeah.
to my friendly PCP, as Dr. Bernstein recommends, and he poo-pooed it too. So thank God, I just walked right into a Walmart. I
Oh,
said,
interesting.
give me 3 vials of your finest regular insulin, and they gave it to me, and it was $25 a vial. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
Um, and I've had tremendous success with it. At first, it was tough to figure out the bolus, but I've got it really dialed in now with the amount of food that I'm eating. So
I think that the regular is it's like with the low carb, the quality of life, because it reduces your diabetes management, but using regular with the low carb meals is, it's
I think it's game
almost,
changing. Yeah.
set it and forget it. You're
It
not going
is.
to go, you know, certainly not above 150 or something like that once you understand how to use and then the correction around the edges is quite small. So like Dave he'll eat his breakfast, he'll go to class, and in his pocket he'll have one or two loaded syringes just in case he for whatever reason, because there's still, randomness around the edges, he'll go to 120, and then he'll say, okay, I know this is unusual, and maybe it's because I didn't work out, and I'm not as blah blah blah. But he'll be able to solve the problem, and he'll just shoot a unit of rapid insulin, and then he'll be back down, and that's the way he stays between 70 and 120, or vice versa. The regular is working so slowly that he'll just take a little.
Right.
He carries a liquid, or he carries
Yep.
some tabs.
And the thing with using regular and being low carb, you don't have to worry about these life and death emergency lows where you eat the entire kitchen. Where you're sitting in your chair and then all of a sudden, the lights start fading in your eyes, and you're desperate to
Jesus,
just
man.
drink the whole thing of orange juice. I was there, and sometimes I didn't make it to the kitchen, and my wife would find me in the heap on the floor, having a real bad seizure. And since I've adopted this lifestyle, I have not had one instance of needing help with low blood sugars, and
It's powerful.
It's very powerful.
You think that the doctors would love that result, but they just don't understand the physics of injected insulin. That's my comment, is they just don't understand how insulin works. They just think new medicine better. The pharma people told them to use it. So you really can't count on your doctor to understand how to manage diabetes.
Yeah, you really can't. And it's just another lesson that lifestyle and nutrition is such a powerful tool, not just for type 1 diabetes, but just generally speaking, with a host of different conditions, from blood pressure to cardiovascular disease, cholesterol, that sort of thing. So
you just took we have a class with Westman and Adapt Academy with my wife and me, Dave. Let's give us a little bit of. I think you're probably the first person to sit through it, so I'm totally curious what you thought about it and what your advice to other type 1s in general, who in all likelihood are walking in the same shoes that you walked in.
Yeah, well, the lessons, it starts off with kind of a grim reality check. Artie, you do a really good job of not sugarcoating the dire situation that type 1s are in, and with the kind of advice that they're getting from their healthcare teams and the ADA regarding target A1Cs, target blood sugars, the nutritional approaches. You go through a lot of medical studies and reports showing the correlations and causations between elevated blood sugars and mortality in type 1 diabetics. But then you end with a real message of hope, in my opinion, that there's not necessarily a cure for diabetes, but there's definitely a solution. And that solution is it's a low carb diet. It's an insulin regimen that Dave uses. And then the other modules that I found also very interesting, led by Roxanne, kind of goes into the psychological aspect of dealing with diabetes yourself, or perhaps someone in your family that has diabetes. I knew previously, before taking your classes, a lot about the Bernstein methods and low carb, but I really haven't studied too much about the kind of psychological aspects, and I found that really interesting. So that's going to be another topic that I'm going to do a deep dive into with all this. But I thought you had a lot of really, really good tips as far as basal and bolus regimens that you go through, and I think during the course it's kind of like a higher level overview of the Bernstein book, but you can always use the Bernstein book as a reference manual, because it's just so thick and it's so detailed and so technical.
Yeah.
I think I think your class is a fantastic starting point. for newly diagnosed families or even people who have had diabetes for decades like I have. So I thought it was very well done. I thought the content was fantastic, and I I am definitely going to watch it more than one time. So there's a lot of stuff in there that I learned myself. Like, for example, I didn't know how why protein, for example, elevates your blood sugar. It causes a glycogen response from a glucagon response from your liver that releases glycogen
Hmm.
into your bloodstream.
Right.
Um, whereas a lot of the low carb people will say, "Oh, it's just protein turning into sugar,"
Right.
and then you have the medical professionals saying that, "Oh, you don't even need to take insulin uh,
Right.
to cover protein." So
Yeah.
it was really good to get the scoop and the actual science behind stuff like that. So you can't find that anywhere else, in my opinion.
Right. The reason we taking insulin is to prevent the protein from turning into
Turning
sugar.
into sugar.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's good. There's a lot of things that I've learned from Bernstein that I think are relevant. The whole hope with that class was to rapidly get people you know understanding from our perspective what were the important things to learn right out of the gate that helped us get Dave under control. And I feel like if we had this, I wanted something, like if I could go back in time, this is what I wish I would have had at diagnosis, because we would have done, we would have got it and watched it, and then it would have been so much easier to get Dave under control. It would have that message of hope, because there was a lot of worry that we weren't going to be able to do this. It wasn't, that there was something missing. There were so many myths too that we had to start to feel comfortable with. Just the kidneys and dietary protein myth, and they're just there's like at least a dozen of these myths that impede you.
At least. Yep. And it's everywhere. It's only the myths are being fought in only certain places. And again,
Yeah.
you have to, it takes a special person to reject what you're being told and do your own research. And I think Roxanne said the locus of control, I
Yeah.
think. Um, you can be captain of your own ship, or you can just let things happen to you. And I think it takes a special person to have that locus of control where you think, it's I'm going to take my own destiny into my hands, and my health is my responsibility. Um, and that's a key attribute, I think, that will make type 1 diabetics successful. So
We're kind of coming to the end a little bit. I'm glad you had a good experience with the class, and it's I think it's amazing that just hearing from different perspectives, even though you've had the condition for multiple decades, it's one of the most valuable things for me was to make friends with people with type 1, and you can learn a lot of tricks. You can see how robust your ideas are, like would they work for this other person or not, and that kind of context. I don't know. I want to kind of give you the floor to finish up
yeah.
and
Well,
hear about some advice you might have for other people.
sure.
And
Well, I think one thing that's critically important, if you're living with type 1 or any chronic condition, is to keep an open mind and never stop learning.
mhm,
Always do your research, and there's always going to be a better way to do things. There's always going to be new technologies, new techniques, and even old techniques, old technologies that might be working better than the way things are working now. I think with the advent of social media, it's extremely important to um, kind of find your tribe, um, and rely on those members in your community to help you manage your condition, to kind of be a sounding board. And that's one thing that I really love about the low carb type 1 community is they're so welcoming. They have such great advice, and I've experienced tremendous success with them. I know it's not for everybody, so it's kind of an individual choice for people how they want to manage their diabetes. But
Yeah.
I've done it both ways. I've done the standard American diet. I've done the ADA diet, and just based on my experience, that this has been the best in the 25 years that I've had type 1. And I know a lot of other people feel the exact same way. And like I said earlier in the interview, I think once you find something that works so well for you, you really want to tell the world. And that's what a lot of people in the low carb type 1 community, how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just encourage, if you're out there, keep an open mind. Always be learning, be a self-advocate for your own health. If there's something that you need, don't be afraid to ask your doctor, or even find a new doctor. Ask for advice, and look out for yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome talking to you, Mike. Let's do this again in like 6 months or so, like
Absolutely.
maybe in the summer, and we'll see how you're doing.
Sure.
And we'll think of something else to talk about. It's
Yeah.
pretty fun. I think we should definitely do it again.
Yeah, absolutely, Artie. Anytime. I'm down to anything I can do to help the type 1 community. Because I've been there. I've needed help before, and if our message can get out and help just one person, I think it's all worth it. So.
All right, man. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Artie.